Warning: this episode deals with war, conquest, torture, and other sensitive topics that are not suitable for younger viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Dragonus Podcastus. I'm your host, Deadphonic, and with me is Queen Byron again. Do you want to say a quick hello? And just, yeah.
Hello, everyone. You can't get rid of me.
Yeah, you can't get rid of her. I would be kind of lost with her. Pretty much. This show would pretty much not be kind of driven into the ground. Anyway, if you guys enjoy our podcast, you can support us at patreon.com/Dragonus Podcastus. I'm also in the process of actually writing a book. It'll be a manual for surviving a D&D campaign. If anybody who watches NCIS and knows Gibbs rules, some of those may be in here, so just letting you know. When it gets published, I will let you know, but no guarantees at this point, because I'm still in the writing process. Anyway, Byron, are you afraid of the dark?
It depends on what's in the dark.
Okay, well, I'm about to introduce you to a new definition of fear and terror and despair. So we are talking about probably the most evil human faction in all of my little world. We are talking about the Charian Inquisitors, or the Charian Inquisitorius. These guys, I don't like saying this, but they're basically like secret police, but they don't actually like go out and like actively like go out and like just take random civilians off the street. They actually have a purpose. Their entire purpose is actually to hunt down specifically enemies of the state that openly speak out against them or try to incite, revolution and all that. Traitors, obviously, and to find and convert potential recruits. But they have a much more sinister purpose. They have been given training and they possess powers that are designed to take on and take out magic users. But to really understand the purpose behind this, we have to go back to the Blood Moon conflict. So, 30 years ago, the moon turned a blood red. Many races were affected by this, but there was one who suffered under the effects of this most profoundly, which was the giants of the Bathar Mountains. And as the light of the red moon took hold of them, they began to experience a wavering bloodlust and desire for conquest. And they realized that there were 3 cities that lay at the base of their mountain just ripe for taking. And one of these cities was Char. Its defense was mostly consisted of just farmers and those who only had token experience wielding a sword, as the ruling government believed at the time that the news about the giants coming to invade was just a bunch of elvish mind voodoo, so they didn't bother mustering their troops, what they had anyway. And so when the giants attacked, what defense was there was basically wiped out in an hour or so, and the giants took over. And then for 3 months, they held Char until the moon turned back to normal. Then they packed up and they went back to their mountain. But in the caverns of Char, a secret meeting was held by the noble houses of Char. And after the giants left, the Charian government went through a coup d'etat, to which the mayor was executed for supposedly collaborating with the enemy. And the government became a ruling council, and Char became a sovereign nation, to which they sealed off their borders, and any non-humans, particularly giants, that entered Char were to be detained and sent to prisons immediately. And any humans who aided and abetted them were to be either executed or they were to be sent to these prisons as well. However, Tor caught one of this, and King Farengad issued an ultimatum. They either cease their crusade of fanatical revenge, or he would march his army upon Char and force a surrender. And so the ruling council spat in his face and called him a Hikla lover, which Hikla it translates roughly into non-human and is generally considered to be a derogatory slur. And thus, it kicked off a war that lasted 3 long years until Char's resources were basically drained almost completely. And the people were starting to turn on the council, and they had no way to strike out their enemy without them knowing and being able to counter it. So they were forced to sign a treaty known as the Blood Moon Acclamation, which basically said they could not openly attack or detain any non-human or humans that supported them, and thus began a sort of Cold War where tensions were so hot they could feed a furnace for several weeks. Of course, Char decided to basically install a cloaking dome so that no one could get into the city and spy on them without them knowing. And this is where we come back to the Inquisitores. So one of the things that Char set up was something called a re-education center, but it is often commonly referred to as the Spire by the prisoners. Do you have any questions so far?
Well, what is the cloaking dome? What does that do?
Okay, so a cloaking dome is basically a device that projects hallucinatory terrain, so regular people either see mountains or impassable terrain, and they therefore go around it. But those that know the secret know where the entrance to the borders are, usually. And as for and I actually have a quote here that basically sums up what I mean by re-education. So they basically teach their version of history, but they do it in such a way that it's not like sinister. So, quote, after the Blood Moon conflict ended, the cowardly giants retreated back to their mountain fortress to regroup and continue to warmonger. The subsequent war with the Hikla-loving traitors of Tor was the result of the arm and reach of both the elven witches and the giants plotting their revenge. To say anything else is an insult to the brave men who stood in defense when the first initial wave of giants first arrived and is punishable by death or sentenced labor. So, here's an example of what actually happens when you are captured by an Inquisitor. Let's say you're an average civilian living in one of the cities in the Shaw Empire. You get attacked by the Archelians. They'll rip you apart and they'll cook you later. Not the worst way to go. You are invaded by the dwarves. They throw axes in your face, or perhaps they'll tackle you off a cliff or something, or maybe just punch the crap out of you until your face doesn't resemble a face anymore. Painful, but it's hit or miss. You are attacked by the Zamarans. They either shank you with their ice cold knife swords, or they use an ice shredder shotgun to basically amputate one of your limbs. That's pretty rough. But if you are captured by an Inquisitor, they will start by hanging you upside down in your undergarments, and they introduce you to new definitions of pain and suffering. And I'm going to list off the manners of tortures that they employ, and I apologize in advance. So, they will whip and flay you. They will pump you full of truth serum. They will pump you full of serum that basically enhances all the pain you feel times 20. They attach electric nodes to your head that induce neuroelectric torture, which is basically they stimulate the pain receptors in your body to basically so you feel constant agony. They'll bring in an aspect of fear. They will invade your mind. They sometimes summon in a succubus to quote-unquote charm the information out of you. They do the Sith lightning thing where they'll basically just shoot lightning bolts at you. And if you were a magic user of any kind, they'll put on a special mask that inhibits your ability to call upon your powers. They will sometimes just dunk you in water. They have chakra torture, which is basically the idea of I believe it's either Buddhist or Hindu, but basically there's 7 points. There's 7 chakra points in the body, and basically the idea is they use specific tools to stimulate these chakra points. They inflict the maximum amount of pain possible while still keeping the victim alive. Then there's electric eel shock therapy, which is basically how, it's kind of like it's like how a defibrillator works. So basically the idea is that you basically shock your the person's heart to the point where it stops beating, and then they restart it, so you literally have your breath snatched away from you. They will sometimes gouge out an eye and wait for it to grow back, and they do it all over again. They bring in rat swarms to gnaw at your ankles, or they will sometimes amputate a limb, grow it back, and do it all over again until they get the information they want, or they simply cannot break you. If they can't break you, they will just straight up kill you. But if they do get the information, they'll just chuck you out onto the street and let you die from malnourishment and the agony that your body has endured. Sometimes, or they will convert you into a new recruit, or they'll just cut you up into little tiny pieces, ship you in a box back to wherever you came from, which usually includes a single message. This is what happens to spies and non-human lovers. Now, there is one person who has survived being interrogated in the Spire and lived to not only escape, but tell the tale about what happened to him. This man is one Abros Thelk. He was simply a preacher. He's a simple priest, nothing special. A teacher of the good word of the light of Valkyria. In fact, he lived in Taun, which is in Char territory, technically. So, one day, Abros is teaching a group of people about the good word and warning the people about the things that Char has and is doing. And when he comes home back to his home, a group of commandos kidnap him from his mare and they take him to the Spire. An Inquisitor is interrogating him about Taun's military might and any assaults they plan to launch. But Abros repeats the same thing. They are not planning anything. Their military might is only half that of Khatun or Tor. This frustrates the Inquisitors so much, so they decide to torture him endlessly. He lasted 15 months of non-stop torture, and his secret was that his faith in the light was so strong that Lady Valkyria herself basically granted him pain render immunity, which basically means, like, he doesn't feel pain at all. When no matter what they do to him, it just doesn't register. And even though he was wearing that power inhibiting mask, even though he was a preacher, he was still able to call upon his powers to preserve his strength until the time was right. He managed to hide away a tool and use it to escape. And this is the first and only recorded successful escape attempt. Char propaganda would say otherwise. So Abros manages to flee back to Tor. He tells King Ferengad what happened and is put under the protection of the Solaris Knights and has been under their protection ever since. Now let's talk about their powers. Ooh. Okay. So the Inquisitors, as I said before, they have the ability to basically not directly cut off, but they have the ability to directly and indirectly disrupt the magic user's ability to cast spells. Save for maybe the possibility of the cleric or druid, but that's debatable. It depends how you look at it. So a magic user who is within proximity to an Inquisitor, when they turn on this effect, basically will not be the effectiveness of their spells will be reduced. And the range that this can happen it varies depending on the Inquisitor and how powerful they are. It could be anywhere from 20 feet, 50 feet, 100 feet, up to a mile. Now let's quickly go over infamous Inquisitors. So the first one is Inquisitor Tila. She's the one who often summons the succubi or turns into a succubi herself. What happens next are things I cannot and will not talk about on YouTube. But I'll let your imagination run wild on that one. And then there's Inquisitor Rusk. He specializes in more brutal methods of torture. He is effectively a sadist, and his favorite means of torture is the eye gouging and the neuroelectric shock therapy. And then finally, we have High Inquisitor Psalm. This guy is a real piece of work. This guy is a piece of death-worshipping garbage. And there is a very special place for him when he gets sent to hell. And there is very little he will not do. But some of the worst deeds that he has done include, but are not limited to, he has converted Fern's student into an agent. He actually ordered Princess Lucy to be kidnapped so that he could brainwash her and use her as an instrument to assassinate King Fair. He authorized the commando raid on the palace. He personally killed Fern's father and enslaved his mother, and then took Fern in when he was only 7 years old and indoctrinated him. One time, a village would not surrender to their non-humans, so he ordered their village burnt to the ground, and then they drove the people there so they would flee into the nearby forest. He ordered the furs be burnt down and the wood be used to fuel the furnaces. However, this woke up an Entmoot that kicked the Charians very hard. Like, we're talking smacking them upside the rear with a paddle hard. So they never tried to attack the forest again. But they got their eye on it. And the Ents, in return, granted sanctuary to the people, giving them shelter, food, water, and most importantly, knowledge, because knowledge is the greatest weapon. And last but most horribly, he tried to kill Nessie. Poor Nessie. So basically, Inquisitors are scum, and the only people they technically answer to is the ruling council. They've also set up a massive network of spies, infiltrators, saboteurs, and assassins to counter Division W5. However, unbeknownst to them, W5 actually has people inside their ranks, and at the right time, they can take down the entire Inquisitorious at a moment's notice. Do you have any other questions since I'm on a roll here?
So, what about, like, Sister of Valkyria or Solaris Knight? Would being in proximity to an Inquisitor affect those powers?
Fortunately, no. The Sister's faith in the Great Mother is powerful enough to resist that effect. They actually have the ability to cleanse brainwashing, and they have the ability to basically kind of counter it, and you can just shut off that ability completely. As for the Solaris Knights, they aren't affected because their power comes from the sun god and draws upon the natural energy created by the sun. So unless you attack a knight at night, where there's no sun to draw from, you're kind of at a disadvantage. Any other questions before we like finish off the episode?
Well, these guys sound terrible. What's the best way to neutralize them?
Okay, well, this is a very difficult process. So, first of all, you have to identify them, and generally a detect evil spell isn't going to work because their essence is cloaked from detection, but that can also give them away. B, once you've identified the Inquisitor, they either have a small force of goons to stall you while they escape, or they turn on the magic dampening effect. And they aren't slouches in combat either, to keep in mind. And C, even if you aren't a magic user or have the ability to resist that effect through strength of will, even if you subdue them, they usually have a poison capsule at the ready, so unless you know about that and are quick enough, you aren't going to get any information out of them because they're probably already dead. And unfortunately, the reality is that, especially in Taun, as it is the closest to Char, Inquisitors are a very real threat, and they often spread fear and panic. Thankfully, the public is aware of their existence, and they take certain measures to ensure that an Inquisitor can be captured and interrogated before they're sent off to prison, or, a war tribunal, because we're kind of in a state of war. They're kind of in a state of war at the moment. But, yeah. That's the Inquisitors. That's a bit of a disheartening episode, but what are your final thoughts before we wrap up here?
They are rough. I would not want to face one.
Yeah, you're lucky. Well, most people are lucky. The only way you can really get the attention of the Inquisitors is if A, you're a former Inquisitor that escaped. B, you piss them off just enough. They're like, okay, I'm going to handle this myself. Or C, you just so happen to be like, a non-human, or you're a magic user that's causing a lot of trouble. They generally speaking, they don't usually go after like women and children, but any like priestesses or any like women druids or any women magic users, they generally don't go through the torture process. They just kind of put them in like a cell and make sure they're fed and all that. So there's some like silver lining to it. The only problem is that, well, if Char were to commit its full military might against Tor, the Inquisitors would probably be the ones who are basically just kind of rounding everybody up and kind of like, they're either like, okay, you die, you're going to become a new recruit. We'll just toss you into the sea and let fate decide. Basically, you do not either you unintentionally piss them off or you intentionally piss them off because you want to draw them out. Anyway, that's a very grim, dark way to end our episode. But next week we're gonna be covering clerics. Yay! Our first holy class and our second magic user class.
Well, I get the artificer and the bard.
Oh yeah, that's true. So it'll be our third. Yeah. So okay. So yeah. So yeah, stay tuned for that. On a happy note, here's a picture of a pony. Just to kind of end off the episode on a happy note. And we'll see you guys next week.